Rivka is doing a PhD here at CDU within the College of Health and Human Sciences, and Eve is doing a PhD as well within CFAS, the College of Indigenous Futures Arts and Society. So they're both just starting out on their PhD, so I'm sure they'll appreciate your feedback at the end, which is part of the purpose of them giving a presentation here today. So we've got Christine, she's a PhD student here from the College of Education, and she's had a lot to do with education in Indonesia and voluntary Australian volunteers. Anyway, I'm not going to take up any more time, so Christine, thank you.
Good morning. The brief of our mini-conference asks how are CDU researchers contributing regional response to contemporary security, technology, environment and economic development challenges. Today, I present my research that engaged and now studies an online interregional collaborative inquiry responsive to sectarian conflict in Indonesia. Earlier this year, international media covered demonstrations outside Indonesia's constitutional court related to disputed election results, with 46,000 security personnel installed to secure protest sites in Jakarta. More recently, we've been alerted to other long-standing sectarian conflict in Indonesia, with separatist movements in Papua. The rise of sectarian conflict is sadly accompanied by violence and breaches of social justice, which also impact regional security, the environment, and economic development. Engaging and studying a collaborative inquiry of peace values arises from my cross-cultural living in Indonesia for the last 15 years, where I saw colourful expressions of culture, along with great ignorance, animosity, and impacts of violent conflict resulting from pseudo-community tensions. One colourful cultural custom example and disconnection is in Bali tooth filing. To an average non-Balinese, hearing only basic details of this practice that involves physically filing and removing enamel coating of 6 teeth, leaving sensitivity, it seems strange and potentially even barbaric. Another example is the tradition of Chinese New Year, where Indonesians with Chinese ancestry get dressed up as dragons, pigs, monkeys, lions, and other creatures, do acrobatics at full moon once a year. While the costumes are elaborate and the choreography impressive, to the outsider, the custom is strange, disconnected to daily living, and perceived incomprehensible or offensive to other groups who hold these animals as unclean. The list of his strange customs goes on, producing walls and stereotypes that block friendly engagement that might otherwise produce understanding and peaceful respect. With animosity, ignorance and pseudo-community producing violent sectarian conflict, the current government prescribes a mental revolution. That is, a revolution of cultural roots to direct contemporary behaviour and calling for educational institutions to animate the Pancasila in daily life. The Pancasila is the nation's 5 founding principles, praces as unity and diversity. Here a challenge presents. As past presidential Pancasila initiatives are described as indoctrination, or as binding the people in superficial unity with formulaic representation of national culture within institutional structures. Further, educational practice is described as too abstract, producing a gap between theory and practice. Analogous issues emerge within international research discourse with similar cultural remedy. Kress describes necessity to break out of factory mould and shift from industrial imposed assumptions of predictability and singularity. To ensure inclusive egalitarian interactions, Wesley and Bousset promote teacher interaction with shared inquiry and reflection that revitalises age-old collective learning practice. Concurrently, digital tools emerge. Progressively, online collaboration is promoted by Garrison as facilitating reflection and a sense of community. Building on this, an analysis of the Panchasila directs my research methodology. Inspection of the Panchasila reveals that the 5 principles are drawn from cooperative cultural heritages, evident in village interactions across the archipelago for centuries, and have a relational focus. Engaging a collaborative inquiry revitalises Indonesian indigenous wisdom contained in the Panchasila. This includes deliberations in the 4th Sila amongst representatives and the cooperative ethos that's said to be the heart of the Panchasila as social mechanisms for communication and interaction. Harnessing the online environment as collaborative infrastructure is undertaken to facilitate representative interregional involvement, sharing resources and agency at an affordable cost. Study of the interactions and dialogue in the collaborative inquiry utilises a contextualised version of Enstrom's activity model from cultural historic activity theory and transformative learning discourse to study learning taking place in dialogue and explorations of teachers' shift in understanding a socialised knowledge of the Panchasila to self-authoring epistemology. In the diagram, you'll see Indonesian contextualised constructs and notes that there's 2 layers of mediating tools that both constrain and support learning. Just a quick overview of the research logistics. I engaged 24 teachers in 15 locations with 6 religions over 6 weeks of small group online collaboration that was supported by a 10-minute video clip at the start of each synchronous session. And there were video conference calls, asynchronous sessions, online forums, and an interview. I asked the research question, what are the teachers' experiences in the online interregional collaborative inquiry, and how do these support or hinder contemporary interpretation of the Panchasila? This diagram shows my progressive analysis showing the intentional orchestration of diverse connections and discussion with supported unifying focus contribute to peaceful attitudes, conduct and relations. Conversational processing was enabled and assists with breaking down problematic frames of reference. For example, teachers' prior concepts of conflict and difference were basically framed for avoidance. In the inquiry, looking at alternatives to avoidance and engaging to understand brought about self-authoring, it must have moved by itself, a self-authoring of a functional unity and diversity narrative. The teachers developed what Mesereau in the field of transformative learning describes as a perspective that is more inclusive, discriminative, open, reflective and emotionally able to change. Mesereau says that such frames of reference are better than others because they are more likely to generate beliefs and opinions that will prove true or justified to guide action. Let's have a quick look at some of the teachers' reflective statements. I know there's a lot on this page and I've committed a slideshow faux pas, but just choose your favourite colour. I'll just let you read a couple. There's a lot that's conveyed in these statements. We see relational learning at work. Benke and Stutton ascribe the relational learning is a process where the individual suspends judgment and struggles to understand others' points of view from their perspective to see holistically rather than analytically. I want to read more, there's a lot more in my thesis, but I'll just share another one here. This one is from Intan in West Java. The colours actually are linked to the islands that are on the earlier map. Can I go on? Yeah. I wanted you to read it because it's their words, not my words. So we see in the teacher's scaffold interactions develop unity between theory and practice. This is evidence of what Freire described as epistemological curiosity. He states that curiosity is often missing in dialogue as conversation, and posits that hierarchical structures perpetuate thinking in terms of either or, and submits that these need to be overcome through dialogue that liberates and is characterised in cooperation. As such, in Intan's comments, we see the cultural disconnect described earlier replaced with a sense of engagement. Oh, sorry, I just want to keep going there for a moment. Further, the idea of supporting scaffolded of a collaborative inquiry at an institutional level gains merit. In Napitapulu's comment, he asserts that the traditional system of Indonesia, gotong royong, mutual assistance and synergy, must be revived and used for creation of lifelong learning experience environments and adult learning structures. We'll move on to now Augustina's comment. I've just highlighted, oh, that's a different font, so it was a bit bigger. Key thing she wanted to say was, the opportunity I get, even on the small screen of my phone, brings amazing insight. I can see a person's manner and character, substance. I obtain what I need, a sense of knowing. We get to know others by their manner, behaviour, words, and social communication. And all of the teachers actually volunteered their own phone as part of the research project. In Augustina's comment, we see the scaffolded collaborative inquiry as a partnership of Indigenous knowledge and transformative learning. Indigenous knowledge discourse outlines a central focus of building relationships through reciprocity and authenticity, with knowledge creation through observed integrity. And transformative learning theory describes experiences are acquired and validated via human interaction and experience, rather than holding up external forms of knowledge as is prevalent in content-driven training methods. Such comments result from various stimuli and prompts, including the teachers got to explore the customs of the two that I explored earlier. I'll just share briefly again, but we actually explored a large number of customs. And together, they looked at the Panchasila, the 5 values, and said, here are some of the ways our customs connect to the common ground values. So in the Balinese tooth filing custom, there was a humility, recognising that we need to resist evil. And there was the 6 teeth that are filed actually represent 6 known evils. I can remember 4 of them. You might remember the other 2, but there's things like anger and lust and greed. And they're reminded. So when they file the teeth, it's just a little part that's filed, and it's reminding them we have an evil and we need to respond to that and not allow it to overtake us. So when they had this knowledge of the other culture and saw how it connected to the common values, they were like, yes, I can respect and I can understand. And again, in the Chinese New Year custom, very similar. It was still acknowledging and recognising a spiritual realm, and also acknowledging unity and diversity in there. A lot more there. I've seen the yellow card, so I'll keep going. And looking at the traditions and the Panchasila simultaneously, the teachers came to understand and respect that all backgrounds were given opportunity to share. From the collaborative sessions, the teachers shared their relationships and new understandings with their students and developed inclusive practice. Some of them actually showed some of the video conference calls to their students. To conclude my presentation today, I submit research. This research is not only beneficial to fostering greater well-being of the teachers and their classes and communities directly engaged in the inquiry, but also the findings are of interest to Indonesian policy, educational research, and international relations, and others who have the opportunity to read or hear of their experiences and glean from intercultural understandings that provide insight into Indonesian sensitivities and dispositions in post-colonial dynamics, efforts transforming institutional practice, cultural interfaces for peace and understanding, and application of digital tools. It is my hope that the study develops respect and seeing people as more than stereotypes, and facilitates the treasure of cultural heritages to address contemporary problems. and opens the way for more to have a similar experience. I'll close now with a quote that reminds us of the importance of relational responses to challenges. While the context of the quote is Indonesia, I think you'd agree with me that the statement is true for any context in the sense that the idea of peace or war grows from our beliefs. Thank you.
So we move on to our final presenter for the session.